Alan, thank you. Can I just ask if my presentation is showing properly on the screen?
It is, yeah.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be with you here today. I'm going to talk about the often sensitive and somewhat contentious issue of predation and what we can do to manage this issue for our native salmon. We've heard this morning that the Atlantic salmon is in crisis, and the causes for that are very much multifactorial. But predation is one of those causes. Predation by sawbill ducks, such as goosandas and mergansers, by cormorants and by seals, both grey and common seals. Now, on some rivers, and the Spey is just one example, the Atlantic salmon is a protected species. But so too are these predators, and that can present a dilemma, particularly for the licensing authorities. Now, predation is one of the 12 pressures that have been identified that are facing our iconic salmon that are going to be addressed under the Scottish Government's wild salmon strategy. And as John Armstrong alluded to during his presentation, some of those 12 pressures, particularly the climate change elements, can be particularly challenging to address. But predation is one of the issues that we can actually do something about. Now, to our predators, to those who would challenge us in our predation control, I would say that there has to be a balance between the conservation needs of our iconic Atlantic salmon, which we all accept is a species in crisis, and the conservation of other species. If we look first at predation by piscivorous birds, these include goosandas and mergansers, as well as cormorants. Now, these birds are protected and can inflict significant losses on salmon, particularly during the smolt run period of April and May. Just to put this into perspective, goosandas are likely to eat 500 grams, that's half a kilo, of juvenile fish each day. Now that's 35% of a goosander's average body weight, each and every day, and 2/3 of those juvenile fish are salmon. Now, they can be moved off rivers by a process of applying to Nature Scot, formerly SNH, for a license to remove some piscivorous birds under a broader programme of shooting to scare. And that licensing system over the last 18 months or so has been reviewed after the then SNH considered it to be unduly onerous on fisheries managers. Now, in order to better understand the impacts of these birds, as well as to principally support our licence application, we and others undertake extensive bird counts throughout the year. We aim to do at least 4 per year, and we cover 90 kilometres of the 170 kilometres of the main stem River Spey, which we survey either from canoes or with teams counting by walking and driving. Now, even then, we're only able to cover some 30% of the wetted area of the catchment. But these surveys put even us under, as one of the larger district salmon boards, under significant pressures. It requires resources to purchase canoes, train staff and equip them, to service life jackets and so on each year. And many district salmon boards simply don't have the resources to undertake such work. I need pretty much all of my team to count just 30% of our catchment, and that doesn't yet include the tributaries, for which we'd need to recruit teams of volunteers. And as you'll all know, that's a different issue in its own right. Now, the application form also requires considerable data on the feeding habits of piscivorous birds in your catchments, the health of your fish stocks within the rivers, and assessments of the damage that these birds are inflicting on your fish populations. Compilation of all of this puts even more pressure on the already limited resources that so many district salmon boards are under already. Now, we've suggested to the Scottish Government that they can help with this. They could issue licenses with nominal quotas to all district salmon boards to undertake some limited form of piscivorous bird removal, perhaps using count data from adjacent rivers as an index to justify those licenses. I'm going to move on to the issue of seal predation, and like fish-eating birds, grey seals and common or harbour seals, as they're otherwise known, are also protected species. Now, around Scotland, the number of common seals has been declining, but the number of grey seals, this has been particularly noticeable in our area, has been increasing. My predecessor, Dr. James Butler, back in 2005, put together an extensive Murray Firth seal management plan to address this issue, and he worked closely with the Sea Mammal Research Unit, SMRU. And that research showed that some seals develop specialist behaviour. I've called them rogue seals in the past, but Alan Wells has corrected me and said, no, they're not rogues, they're specialists. But in so doing, they break away from the main colonies and penetrate well into the rivers to predate on salmon and sea trout. And here on the Spey, we've had seals in the past go as far up as Tulcan and Granton. That's 35 to 40 miles from the estuary to predate on salmon, swimming through all of our prime fishing beats in the process. Now, I have to emphasise, it's only a small proportion of seals that develop this specialist behaviour and break away from the main colonies, but the impact that they have is totally disproportionate, and it has a very significant impact on both our migrating fish as well as our spawners. Now, we need effective means to reduce predation by seals on our fish, and our preferred method has been to either prevent or discourage them from even entering the river using acoustic deterrent devices, such as the one pictured in the centre right of the screen here. Now, these acoustic deterrent devices have an efficiency of somewhere between 50% and 80%, depending on where they're located. So even at their most efficient, some seals are going to get past them. Furthermore, 2 years ago, back in 2019, Chris Conroy on the Ness deployed a portable acoustic deterrent device, which he was towing behind a boat. And when he switched it on, the seal that he was trying to deter merely swam towards the boat. Now, some work is underway to incorporate new and effective acoustic deterrent devices within acoustic fish counters. And John Armstrong alluded to this during his presentation earlier this morning, where he said that the government have commissioned SMRU to work on this. I should point out that if these can be developed, they would be deployed in river. And so there would be no disruption to cetaceans. It would only be seals entering the rivers that would be affected by these hopefully effective ADDs. This work, though, really needs to be promoted and accelerated, and we've asked the Scottish Government to support this. Now, over the course of the last year, the principles for licensing have changed. We used to apply for licenses to prevent serious damage to our fisheries. But last year, the Animals and Wildlife Penalties, Protections and Powers Scotland Act came into force, and it removed that ability for us to apply for a licence on that basis. It's important to recognise, though, that the provisions within the Marine Scotland Act still apply, whereby we can apply for a licence for the conservation of other animals, and for our purposes, read Atlantic salmon, and those provisions still remain. It's absolutely right, though, that with the sensitivity of this issue, that we and Marine Scotland licensing operations team are under close scrutiny with this. And we need to be able to carefully demonstrate the conservation case for protecting our iconic salmon from predation. The picture bottom right there, just out of interest sake, I added, that was a fish caught 10 days ago here on the Spey at Delaguile, which is near Aberlour, so probably 20 miles from the coast. And it was one of 3 fish caught that week, 2 of which, including this one, were showing seal mark damage to its rear flanks. Fisheries Management Scotland, in the meantime, has taken a proactive approach to predation management, and it's formed a Predation Committee which they've asked me to chair. That includes Marine Scotland, both policy and science, Nature Scots licensing team, CEH, the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, various district salmon boards who are involved in seal management, and SASA, Science and Advice for Scottish Agriculture, who advise Nature Scot and the Scottish Government on the quotas for piscivorous bird removal. Now, these organisations are working together to better understand the impact of both avian and seal predation and to develop effective management outcomes. We haven't been able to meet over the last year because of the challenges of COVID and its impact on, particularly on the public sector. But whilst more needs to be done, it is a highly effective marriage of the public and private sectors. Just by way of conclusion, I began by remarking that the Atlantic salmon is in crisis. I think we all accept that, and the causes are multifactorial, with predation being one of them. Some of our predators are protected, but despite that, there are things that we can do to actively reduce predation of salmon and to protect our iconic fish. I said earlier that to our critics, and there are numerous critics of this, there has to be a balance between the conservation needs of our iconic Atlantic salmon, a species in crisis, and the conservation of other species. We've called upon the Scottish Government to do more. They can help. They can give nominal quotas and licences for piscivorous bird control to all district salmon boards, particularly those who don't have the resources to conduct the counts and collate the data to apply for licences otherwise. They can also promote the development of effective acoustic deterrent devices for seals. Ladies and gentlemen, there has never before been a more pressing need to protect the Atlantic salmon. And as we agreed earlier, predation control is one of the 12 pressures that we can actually do something about. Thank you for your attention.